How's it going, everyone? And welcome to the Bot Podcast, where we interview movers, shakers, and innovators and talk all things conversational user interfaces. I'm your host, Chad Oda, and today we have a very special guest, Samer Tarazi. And Samer is the founder of Eila from Amman, Jordan. Now, Eila is a chatbot platform that can automate your product sales directly from your Facebook page through a chatbot. Samer has also recently announced partnerships with Visa and Freedom Pizza in the UAE. And at that, Samer, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Chad. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. So before we get started, I always like to ask sort of a unique question. And you and I actually had met through your cousin that I had met out here in my neck of the woods in Seattle, Washington. And when I first met him and we started talking about chatbots, he had told me that you had got invited to F8, and this was a couple of years ago. And I know the story, but I think our folks on the podcast here might be a little interested how all that culminated.
Sure. So initially in 2017, Facebook came out and said they were organizing something called the Bots for Messenger Challenge. And it was mainly targeted at MENA and Sub-Saharan Africa. And so they kind of called for different bots with different functionalities because they kind of wanted people to get on the platform and start building. So we kind of submitted the first early versions of Eila, which was basically a demo for a burger joint, basically selling delivery orders through Messenger itself. That thankfully went into the finals, and then we eventually ended up being a runner-up for the productivity category. And so we ended up getting $10,000, getting mentorship for 3 months from Facebook. And then eventually that led into, an invitation to F8, which we attended in 2018, which was pretty cool. Super focused on privacy, but still cool. And, that's how that happened.
Cool. No, I think that's a really inspiring story, for a lot of people out here in the chatbot and voice space, to see sort of how fast you guys got visibility. And then you guys were, on stage and out there at F8. I think that's really cool. Maybe sort of going back to where this all started, how did you sort of get initially involved in the chatbot and voice space here?
Perfect. So, even before we actually heard of chatbots, I was a huge fan of automation. My previous startup, I was basically trying to automate low budget ad sales for premium publishers. So creating a self-serve ad platform. And eventually, time went on. That didn't work out, and it died in 2016. A couple of months later, I heard of Facebook opening up the Messenger platform, and of course, bots became the hype. And I just felt like, oh, you know what? This sounds like an excellent opportunity. Thought of creating all sorts of chatbots. Initially, wanted to create a personal assistant. Then, like everybody did, we thought about customer care. And then eventually, the one that kind of landed with me is I wanted to create a bot for sports stadiums to basically automate in-seat orders. So with that, we actually started communicating with professional sport teams and universities in the US. Because in Jordan and the whole MENA region, we don't really have that kind of sport culture with food and so on. But that didn't work because we were very far away, couldn't get people to understand the value of this. Most of the universities were actually still building apps. So it was really hard to get them to buy that. And then eventually I didn't want to just stick with the one concept. And so we pivoted into, we said, let's serve local businesses. And we created a demo for a local coffee shop. And that allowed them to basically do in-house orders and a virtual drive-through through the bot. That kind of went well, and I say kind of because I don't think it really provided real value, and it was much more of a sexy PR tool that they benefited from, and that ended up getting a lot of people interested in bots and so on, and then basically commerce became the vertical that we wanted to focus on.
Cool. No, I think that's That's sort of a really sort of natural segue, right? You're already interested in automation. You see Facebook releases, a lot of accessibility on their messenger platform. And, I think just like all of us, it's just like, let's build these really complex virtual assistants. And then it's like, okay, let's scale it back and let's test some things. And, I think that's really cool. So talk to me a little bit about how that culminated, into the Eila platform, and maybe talk a little bit about the platform and what market opportunity you guys are trying to address with it.
Sure. So like I said, when we launched with the coffee shop, a lot of F&B businesses especially became really interested in getting the tool. It was really starting to become, I would say, over easy to sell because, chatbots were like magic at that point. Everybody who was just trying a demo was, becoming like, oh, crap, I need this for my business as well. So that kind of picked up from there. But the unfortunate fact was we were kind of seeing, okay, we're not really providing value to these people. They were just picking up the tool because it was a PR thing. And I didn't want Eila to be that. I wanted it to provide real value, to become a centric tool to the business and become a main sales channel for people who would actually need it. One of our customers, fortunately, would qualify as a social seller. So it was a lady who was basically preparing sushi, believe it or not, at home. Her business kind of grew and she still was operating from her basement. And don't ask about health issues, coming from Jordan seems not to be a big issue. But anyway, eventually she was still taking orders through her Facebook page through the phone. So when Eila came in, we kind of automated 15% of her daily sales. We were able to provide real value and help her get more time to focus on her core business, get more clients, and be able to actually grow the business and then open up a restaurant, which actually happened. From there, I felt like, we're focusing on the wrong kind of customer. I was getting attention from franchisees, and one of them was actually Domino's Pizza. That was really interesting for us. It was really attractive. We wanted to do it. But then as time passed on, it felt like if we do that as well, it wasn't really going to be a main sales channel for them. So we decided to kind of pivot again relatively and turn it into a SaaS platform and build something that would help people selling on social media who were already taking a lot of orders through chat and in our area, WhatsApp, to become basically able to automate that part of the ordering process and allow them to, further grow their business and focus on other stuff rather than, answering questions, taking the orders, fulfilling the order, updating customers about order statuses, and so on. And so that's where it came from. Today, we're almost there. I would say it's about 95% done. We're putting the final touches on it, and hopefully soon we'll launch our public beta for everybody to be able to use the platform.
Cool. Well, I think we're all expecting and waiting for it because, I'm sure you've seen this, which was probably a big driver. It's like a lot of the use cases are around sales, right? It's incredible, how many case studies are out there. I have friends right now that have used chatbots to raise $200,000 for Kickstarter campaigns. And there's all the ones, Chatfuel's been putting out around, cosmetic companies using it to drive hundreds of thousands of dollars of sales, and, I think your product really is going to fulfill that niche, right? It's like all these people right now are building these things from the ground up. They're building the integrations from the ground up. They're building like all of the things in the chat and connecting it to, the inventory from the ground up. So does your platform try and, automate some of those setup components?
So I wouldn't say it's completely automated. I would say it's more of, coming into the platform, building your own product catalog and fulfilling all of that. We do work with specific, larger vendors because it takes a lot of work and customization to be able to automate the largest sense of it. So for example, with Freedom Pizza, the orders go automatically into their POS system. All of the specials come back from their system as well. Inventory, a number of limited orders, so on and so forth. That's completely connected to their system. I think as time passes on, we will definitely support more of the available platforms out there who people might be already using. However, I think our target customer today is somebody who doesn't really have a system, who's basically just doing it out of an Excel sheet or pen and paper even. And we want them to be able to come to Eila first before thinking of creating a website or going and creating an app, to actually want to start with automating their sales process through the same mediums that they're already selling on. So with that sense, that's why we built basically a commerce engine, e-commerce engine from the ground up. And we provide all of these features such as inventory, coupons, offers, opening hours, so on and so forth, all within the platform itself, which then are automatically turned into a bot. I would yet say if somebody has, let's say, 20 to 50 products within their line, they would be able to launch a bot live on Messenger within 30 minutes using the platform.
Oh, wow. Well, I think that's incredible because I see where the positioning is, right? It's like specifically for people that want to run these e-commerce stores based on Facebook. And you guys are providing a lot of the tools to make it really accessible, right? Instead of saying, oh yeah, go build on WooCommerce and then use our platform to integrate and make sort of a e-commerce chatbot, right? It's like we can go to one platform where there's all the inventory management and all the coupons and everything we need there to just scale that out. So I think that's a really cool sort of segment you guys are targeting.
Yeah. I mean, one thing to add here, I think it's a pretty interesting fact that we found. I was starting to get startups who haven't launched yet, coming and saying, we don't want to build, we don't want to go to Shopify, we don't want to build an app and spend a lot of money. We actually want a bot. And that kind of clicked for me. Like that kind of made me feel like, okay, you know what? There are a lot of businesses who might just be coming up or that are really small right now that would need this more than anybody else and would give it proper attention to make it work.
That's actually really incredible because, now that I'm thinking about it, right, it's like, especially for startups, right, it's like trying to test that product market fit. And if you don't have to like spend a bunch of time building out a web presence and then driving traffic to that, conversely with what you're doing here, it's like everyone's already on Messenger. People are already there. Now let's just, like you said, take 30 minutes and spin up a bot and now be able to actually test that product market fit. I think that's a really compelling use case that I actually had not even thought about. That's really cool. So my next question, I think you actually answered a little bit, was going to be, what were some of the initial successes that you guys saw that really encouraged you? And I know the woman making sushi, and then she eventually scaled, and now she owns a business. I think is really compelling. Can you talk about maybe any other success stories that you and your team found really motivating?
Sure. I wouldn't say it was at the beginning. I would say it happened right now, which is three weeks ago. We launched with, like you mentioned, Freedom Pizza and Visa. So it's basically just a pizza delivery bot that is 100% focused on deals. So you get specials and offers on there only. And it's powered by Visa Checkout. So it makes payment really much more seamless. You just add your credit card once, and then you have a username and password that you can use to pay over and over again. So with that, we've been able to actually see over 4,300 orders so far in just 3 weeks, which
wow.
I think is absolutely incredible. There are a lot of factors, of course, that go into that. It's not fair to say it's just the bot. Yeah, I mean, at the end of it, they did like a $3 offer for a medium pizza delivered to your home, which I think was brilliant because it got people to actually use this new medium, be able to get familiar with it. We eventually got, 4,000, 3,500, I don't know, unique users to sign up to Visa Checkout itself. So it got everybody within this medium to benefit from it. And I think leveraging it as a bot, as a deal-only bot, was a completely smart move as well, because it made the ordering process, slim down into just under 10 steps, because you weren't really able to customize, half of the pizza or add olives or whatever it was. It was just a deal, which makes sense because chat interfaces are, at the end of the day, kind of limited at this moment. And so leveraging it for specific use cases like this are showing great success. These businesses are already very accustomed to marketing on social media and so on. So it makes it much easier to convert traffic to a bot rather than websites and apps. And so with that, we've been able to see really, really cool numbers that, I'm happy to say Eila has been able to prove that it could be a main sales channel and drive a lot of sales.
No, I think that's really incredible. And I think specifically what you're pointing out, it's like, within the ecosystem right now, there are a lot of limitations, whether that be with NLP or whether that be a lack of UX standards. And I think that's really, really an interesting insight about compartmentalized use cases are okay, right? Because I think we see a lot of bots today where it's just like, hey, let's try and take what we do on the web app and put it all inside the chatbot, right? And I think that's really, really interesting how it's like you guys are focused on sort of one specific use case with the pizza restaurant where it's just deals. And you're conditioning people to use that channel and expect deals, right? And I think that's really interesting and I think probably could turn into a best practice, for a lot of people listening to this podcast right now to scale back, but it's not necessarily bad, right? I think it actually could be much better.
100%. Yeah, I mean, something I've been seeing a lot is once we get stuck, we use a web view, right?
Yeah.
And that to me it goes against what we're trying to do here. I mean, we believe in the chat interface. We want chat interfaces to become a medium that people can use. And then we go like, okay, let's get out of it and go into a web view. And so what's the difference there? It ends up being just a mini website that you can add a link and have them go to. So I think that beats the purpose. However, I wouldn't say, everything is solvable without a web view. We still are forced to use web views sometimes. But eventually, I think the more we get used to the limitations of chat at this moment, and until I think it won't be solvable until NLP gets to a stage where it's able to basically understand any form of free text and take action accordingly. We need to kind of cope our actions or features accordingly to the current limitations of chat.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. And I think the other thing, leveraging web views where there's a significant benefit as well is just for security. It's just like, you don't have to handle that inside the Messenger client itself. It's whoever is hosting that application, it's on their, server somewhere else. Right. And I think that is, and I was actually going to ask you, so with Visa, I'm assuming it opens a web view to authenticate through that, right? Okay.
For sure. I mean, we've thought about many ways of doing it. We even, kind of went through the logic of doing it through chat, but there are a lot of, like you mentioned, security flows that would, be major issues because at the end of the day, number one, the entire chat history remains there. Any admin for the page can view it. If you enter, any sort of credit card information and so on, then, so, I mean, and that goes to mention as well, we also have limitation from Facebook itself. So we don't have any such thing as basically internal payments in our region yet.
Okay.
Yeah. So all of these things go into account. I'm not saying, web views are that bad, but I would say the bot itself needs to do its core functionalities using chat. Otherwise, it shouldn't be a bot.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. I think, all of us in the chatbot space, we have like this idealistic view of chatbots are going to handle everything in natural language, right? But I think, you pointed it out that a lot of the NLP engines right now just are not robust enough to be able to handle that level of flexibility. So web views are the, realistic alternative right now. So it makes sense, right? But, as these things mature, eventually one day web views probably won't be there. They may be in certain circumstances, but it's just an evolutionary thing, which I totally agree with.
Yeah.
So speaking of that, speaking of the successes, I'm also curious about some of the obstacles you guys face, because I think oftentimes, especially in any emerging technology, identifying the obstacles and then figuring out ways to solve them are actually the points where you learn the most. So I would love to hear, maybe some obstacles you guys ran up against and how you guys ended up solving them.
Sure. I mean, one of the very early challenges, like I mentioned earlier, was how do you get people to understand what a chatbot is? Many of the times I used to say chatbot, they used to think chat box, and you had to go through all of that conversation and explain what this whole thing is. But eventually, creating a demo, I figured out showing people firsthand using the actual product was the best way to get them to understand how it could work. And that eventually turned into an actual leverage rather than a negative thing. So I would say that wasn't a real big problem, but it was an initial hurdle we faced. The second one I would say is, so like I said, when we kind of started giving all these businesses bots, they were already selling using their physical stores. Some of them, were using delivery apps, so on and so forth. And none of them really had their own online presence. And for me, that ended up causing them not being able to basically get traction for their bots. And we kind of started to step into that, creating a 30-second video for people to see how they can use and leverage that, starting to push the businesses to actually create offers within the bots to kind of get people to get it. But eventually, that wasn't what we were building. We wanted to become a platform to just basically facilitate and automate sales on chat, and we didn't want to become, a social media marketing company. So that was one initial hurdle, and I found, like I said, businesses or people who were already using Facebook as a main sales channel were able to get much better results because they already knew how they could leverage the platform and get people to actually use, the messaging or interact with the posts themselves and so on. The final one I would say is, like we've already also said, the NLP. I'm not sure what it is, but maybe it's because once we say chatbot, a lot of us say it's artificial intelligence that sits within chat, right? That seems to give people the impression that it's smarter than they are or something. I don't know, but it kind of becomes like a personal challenge for them to try and break the bot. And so we've had a lot of people come in not wanting to buy anything, starting to say all kinds of stuff just to basically, get to a point where it turns out to be stupid rather than smart. And, that was the point where we felt like, okay, you know what, NLP is not there yet. And it's not just the NLU. I think people are not there yet. I think eventually the end point or the end goal of a bot is to do a certain task. It's not meant to be another human being right now. And if people got that and just used it for what it is, we would end up getting a lot better results and better experiences. Because if you go into an app to order food, you just pick the items, pay, and you're done. If you go into a bot, you want to talk to it. You want to ask it about its name. You want to, So, having a balance between these two things is definitely something that will be the difference between success and failure. For us, we try and always try and drive the user back into the flow to be able to, go into the next step. We are launching better NLP, NLU in our SaaS platform. Hopefully that would be able to take actions based on your free text. But I would still say we are much more focused on going down through a flow rather than allowing users to enter free text.
Definitely. No, I think those are all three great points. I think you're really talking about a lot of stuff people on this podcast will resonate with, right? First of all, sales, right? People are trying to figure out what's the best way to, put this in front of a prospective customer that has never heard about chatbots, or they heard about chatbots, but they think it's like Siri or Google Assistant. It's like, yeah, it can take all my information and all my questions and it can easily answer them. It's like, no, right? And then, I think the NLP part too, it's spot on. And, I know you and I have had long conversations about this as well. The other issue you were talking about where it's just like, these companies want chatbots, but they have no social presence. And it's just like, I want to sell the chatbot, but I don't want to get into Facebook advertisement and social media management and all this stuff. So I think it's a really smart decision how you guys pivoted to a platform model. And if people are going to be going after these one-off builds, I think it's best to be said at this point, go after companies like you're saying that already have a social media presence, that are already leveraging, these web presences to conduct some sort of commerce on, because they probably are already getting an abundance of messages. So I think everything you said was really spot on. Do you mind maybe going into, your sales process at a high level? Because I think a lot of people are still scratching their heads on, do I tell them it's a chatbot? Should I show them a demo? What does this process look like?
Sure. So I think I could segment it into two separate parts, because initially we were basically building separate bots for every single business and launching it as a separate project or app. With that, what we used to do is basically either reach out through social media and basically just a 1-2 liner and then just a demo for the bot. That used to get a lot of attention, like I said initially, because like I said, it had that effect of a magical experience. People used to like it, and we used to be able to close a sale directly. Of course, our pricing wasn't super high. Eventually, it was we were selling it for initially $35 a month. Then it went up to $50 a month. Now, of course, all of our pricing is going to change with the SaaS platform, but so we didn't have any real hurdles to get the business to actually use the product itself. So that was, I would say, the initial part. With the SaaS platform, I haven't actually done this, but we do have a strategy in place that I'd be more than happy to share. So what we're doing right now is, of course, we're going to do a lot of, content marketing, blog posts, social media advertising, so on and so forth. And that's, natural. But we also thought, okay, you know what? We're working in bots. Why not have a sales bot? So what the sales bot is going to do basically is lead filtration. So instead of people coming into our Facebook page trying a demo for a single business type, they would be able to chat with the sales bot, tell it it's basically, their business type, go and try an actual demo that fits their own business type, and then go into questions that would help them choose the right tier for them, so that they'd be able to actually go onto the platform and start building directly. So what we're doing there is basically automating part of our sales funnel to kind of save time and lower the cost of customer acquisition. I yet have to see how efficient that works and the results that come out of that. But yeah, we've built that. We think it'll help a lot, and be more than happy to share once we do have results how that actually turns out.
Cool. No, I love it. I think that's very cool. It's just like, from every single component of your business, I think chatbots can play a part. And, I've actually seen some companies doing lead qualification with bots. But I think what you're trying to do with sort of taking it to the next level of segmentation based on business type and then routing them to the right demo, I think that's really cool. So sort of speaking of the future, what is your sort of end vision for Eila? Like, where do you see this all going?
So, I mean, like I said, it might be very dreamy at the moment, but aren't we all? I mean, at the end of the day, I think people wanting to sell something online will want to go to Eila. I want to establish it as that platform that helps you basically set up a chat shop. And I want basically that to be the number one thing they think of before thinking about a website, before thinking about an app. I definitely think, the natural progression of technology has always changed from one medium to another according to what people were using. It's very clear that people are very interested in using very little numbers of apps. They don't want to download, any other new app for a single function. So I don't know if you know the fact, but about 85% of all downloaded apps get launched once or even never and then deleted. That is a clear indication of that people really are becoming much more locked into specific environments that they want to use. That's good and bad, but at the end of the day, if businesses want to interact with their customers or sell, they need to be available in these platforms. And I hope Eila ends up being the main platform to provide that. And that's why, I chose not to go into the customer support field and rather go into the commerce field, because I truly think the chatbots as a medium will end up being bigger than apps, I think, in the next probably 3 years. And so we want to be, one of the main, if not the main player in the commerce vertical.
No, I love the vision. I love it, especially since right now we're looking at like sort of two camps that are producing ROI, right? One of them is, this customer support camp. And then the other one is, essentially what you're talking about, right? It's like this conversational commerce. And, I think it's a really cool vision because, we see it working today, right? So now it's just a matter of improving upon it and, putting some more automation elements to scale that. So I think that's definitely a very lofty vision. So sort of transitioning to maybe a higher level of conversation around the ecosystem, I feel like I've been asking this question since day one to a lot of people and even to myself as I try new bots. Have you used a chat bot or a voice bot that you actually thought was a really great experience?
So one bot that I actually used was Snap Travel. I think a lot of people know it. It might be, a default thing that everybody thinks about with bots, but I think it does what it needs to do. It's pretty simple, straightforward. The NLP isn't spectacular, but at the end of the day, I mean, you don't get stuck in there and not knowing what to do, but it, leads you into actually booking the hotel or getting the deal at the end of it. So that was pretty cool for me. I actually used it. Of course, we went through many bots, never really used any of them. So I didn't want to actually mention any of those because I felt like, this one I actually used to get something out of. And that's about it, I would say.
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty representative of, most people that I talk to and, even my own personal opinion too. It's just like, if you go into a bot and it does the functional thing you need it to do, I think that's a pretty good experience. But then when you start getting into the weeds a little bit, sure, I think we both have some gripes around how NLP is inside the bot, right? I was actually using the booking.com bot yesterday, and I was like, I was trying to like it goes back to what you're saying, like people try and go into these bots and break them, but it's just like we're in the industry, right? So it's like I went in there and I could look at like the slot filling for, what they were capturing, right? Like the date I was leaving and the location. And then I said something about, I only want to see 5-star hotels, right? And then it just went to the next level and it said, okay, like when is your return date, right? But instead I wrote, actually, I only want to see 4-star hotels. And then the next thing it asked me was something totally different. So I think, bots work good if you use them in the right way, but NLP still has some kinks to work out, essentially.
100%.
Yeah. So, in addition to that, when we're talking about the ecosystem here, and I know we've had pretty long conversations about this in the past as well, what are some of the current obstacles and challenges that you just see right now in the chatbot space?
I mean, it kind of goes back to some of the stuff we mentioned as well, but I definitely think the main obstacles right now are the interfaces. We, like I said, need to get used to what we can and can't do within the chat interface and kind of build experiences around that rather than, like you said, try and mimic a website or an app. Doing that is definitely going to be a failure. Why would somebody ditch an app and go and use the bot if it's a worst experience to do the same thing? So, I mean, we kind of need to get over that, both from a developer perspective and a user perspective, I would say. Again and again, the NLP. I think that's definitely the biggest obstacle right now. I think it's the obstacle and the key. I think once this is broken, it gets to a point where I wouldn't say it's capable of handling free text 100%, but let's say if it's 80% capable of handling free text, I think we're going to go to the next level of chatbots. They would be able to provide much higher value and be able to do many of the things that people imagine it to do right now. And so I think that would be number 2. Number 3 is, I think eventually you need to leverage every platform on its own. So if you're building chatbots on Messenger, they're going to have a different experience than something you build on Alexa. So I can't assume that people will go into Alexa and say, okay, show me the burgers. Then I want the meat burger. And then I'd like some, so you need to build experiences that are fit for every single one of these. Don't just build things because you feel like this is a sexy new platform and I'm just going to build on it, because that's eventually going to lead into horrible experiences. I think, think about it rationally, because you are at the end of the day a human being who would be able to use this. I think, chatbots are at least getting to a point where, the 80% junk is kind of dying off, and 20% of us are still trying to, I would say, figure it out. But there's still hope there for us. But from the voice platform perspectives, I think it's still earlier. I think people just got crazy about it right now, especially with Amazon opening up, and I think that is only going to grow step by step. And like I said, again, developers and users get used to it, know how to use it, and we would eventually be able to turn these into the main mediums that people end up using for whatever, entertainment, news, information, handling their relationship with businesses. And I am sure that will happen, but we're still in the very early days of it actually maturing into that.
Cool. No, I think those are all really, really great points. I was also curious, because I know you had mentioned this previously to me, about, I guess, the native languages that pre-existing NLP and NLU engines are supporting. And I know you were saying that, you were looking into potentially developing something in-house for Arabic. And, in addition to Arabic, because Arabic has a very wide number of different, it could be from Egyptian Arabic or from Saudi Arabia Arabic, and it's all very different. So is that something you're looking into, and maybe talk about the challenge a little bit?
Sure. So when we started looking into getting out of, something like Dialogflow or whatever, and building an actual NLP engine, we started looking a lot on, open source stuff and so on, and then looked at datasets that were available. And we figured out it wasn't just, Arabic, it was actually limited in English. You couldn't find, commerce-centric data sets that could really help you out of the box. Imagine then setting it up for different shops who have different products, and but for Arabic, you have all these different dialects, like you said. So every single country speaks Arabic in a different way. And if they come and talk to a bot, they would not talk the formal Arabic, which is called Fusha. They would talk in their local dialect. That ends up meaning you will have more than 20 languages rather than just one. A lot of work is being done to actually tackle dialects. I think it's not really something people are focusing on right now. Usually Arabic is the last language people actually get into building technology on. So that's a shame. But at the end of the day, today we're focusing on being able to actually access markets who would be able to use the English and leverage it. We do offer our service in Arabic. It doesn't really have Arabic NLU that is strong enough. I would say even, maybe 5x weaker than the English NLU, but it's still kind of, if you want to do, an order, you would be able to do it at the end of the day. We are working on something internally. I wouldn't say we are reinventing the wheel. We're just simply using an open source. We're actually using Rasa, to be honest.
Oh, cool.
And we're building on top of that, starting to create, Arabic data sets for the commerce vertical, and being able to kind of start handling, actions that we'd be able to do with the Arabic language itself. How far are we going to go with that? I'm not sure. From the beginning, I never wanted Eila to be a company that does NLP, NLU technology, because I really believed, the company that comes up with the best NLP, NLU is the company that has the biggest amount of data. And I think the big boys are going to be the source of that. So somebody like Google, Facebook is going to come out with that. And they are definitely going to make it available for everyone, because it ends up allowing them to become a platform. So I've never really wanted to really focus on NLP, NLU internally in Eila. But we are doing something to kind of help us do a couple of actions on our own.
Cool. That was really, really insightful. And, just giving me a lot more perspective on, different languages and how people are trying to reconcile that, for their own NLP, NLU use cases. You also brought up something else, when you're talking in regards to data sets that I've seen can be quite problematic, where, the data or the utterances to train these intent entity models just doesn't exist, right? So, you made a good point with, some of the different businesses you guys work with, the data doesn't exist. So how are you guys going about trying to tackle that problem? I know we've certainly dealt with it in enterprise use cases as well.
I mean, that's definitely a very big challenge at the moment. I mean, the number one challenge for us is not really coming up with the data set. Like I said, we're not really trying to do intense NLU, but at the end of it, we wanted to kind of do a couple of actions, and we were able to create the data set. We would be able to manually create all these different sets of sentences, intents, slots, and fill it up and do the whole thing. At least to a certain accuracy level, I would say. The challenge lies in what do you do when you have all these different categories of products and different products that come into the process. So if somebody comes in into a burger joint and says, I want a cheeseburger, then we have to look for that, be able to find it and add it into the cart. And then you have a flower shop. And so if somebody comes in, so it's basically like you're having to retrain the system for every single merchant, which ends up being really expensive, really hard to do automatically. It's a very manual job. And that's one challenge where we're kind of trying to fix it right now. We are coming up with ideas to be able to basically do that. However, with Rasa and in specific coming up with allowing you to start using TensorFlow, I think that kind of solves part of the problem. Removing the dependency on an actual manual data set. Like I said, again, we keep on going back to the same thing. Once it kind of grows, it's going to open up so many doors for us and the users, and I think that is going to come very soon. However, we are basically tackling every single part of that to try and make it as automated as possible, to provide custom NLU, NLP for every single merchant that comes on the platform.
I love it. I think that's a really pragmatic approach, right? It's like, even for us, it's like build an interim solution that works fairly good and is robust enough, and, wait for like the big incumbents to finally grace us with their great NLU platforms, right? Yeah. So yeah, I love it. I love it. So switching gears a little bit, what is Samer's vision of how chatbots and voice will sort of be incorporated into our lives in the next 5 to 10 years? What is your vision for that future environment?
Sure. I mean, I think it's just going to be like 2008, 9, 10 for apps. I think people are going to go crazy about it. It's going to see the highest conversion eventually. I mean, if we think about the facts and numbers, I think one interesting fact I've always found was the only app category that has shown, an increase in usage rate was messaging. Right? I got 394% increase in usage rate year over year. And it actually had 14% more active users than social media apps. That is simply saying people are spending most of their time within these mediums. I think, we all also follow the WeChat dream. I think at the end of the day, it's definitely going to be different, not the same exact thing, because every single, I would say, country or region has, different habits, different things that they are accustomed to. But I do believe that bots, whether in terms of chat or voice, will be the main source of, like I said, information, entertainment, and interaction with businesses. The form in which that happens, I think, is still yet to be seen. I don't think we're 100% there yet. I mean, we may have bits and pieces and chunks of that, but I do truly believe that that's going to be the main medium that people use.
Yeah, I totally agree with that sentiment. Now, I guess sort of talking about the current times right now, can you maybe talk about any insights or best practices that you guys have discovered as you guys have built these chatbot instances for customers and then eventually migrated to this platform model that you think, the audience should know about?
Sure. I mean, number one, when you're starting to, go into just building the flow itself or thinking about it. Think about the end goal. I mean, it sounds like a really simple idea, but I think a lot of people start building without really, knowing what the actual end function is going to be. So if you have that and it's really clear, focus on that, make the entire experience about that, and don't get really engaged into all the other stuff that come in between, whether that's the NLP, the interface, adding web views, so on and so forth. It doesn't matter. Initially, just focus on the main function and make sure you enable your users to be able to get that done once they've finished the conversation. Number two would be, like I said, understand the limitations. Don't go beyond them. Don't try to basically, just mimic everything. Try to understand how you can provide that end function in the simplest way and form. Messaging and definitely voice are not something that is meant to, be engaged with for, 10 minutes. People would probably want to get something done in less than 2 minutes. Try and build a really simple experience that people can really enjoy, rather than, adding just a bunch of steps to get into it being a drag rather than an experience that they would come back and try again. The other thing would be is, always go back and look at the conversations. This might sound freaky, but I do really look at every single conversation that the bot has. And it really helps us understand how people might eventually interact with it. It does go in line with, for instance, when you're using Dialogflow, you are able to kind of train the bot to respond. But you're also going to see people coming in and interacting in a way that you really didn't see anybody else do. For instance, we've had many customers come into the bot and say, I want 3 pizzas with no, olives, and add a little bit of onion on the, right? So the whole thing as one single message, and they expected the bot to be able to, handle that. And so that kind of tells you, okay, you know what? This might be the future. I know we're not going to be able to do that from day one, but listening to these conversations is definitely something you need to do heavily in the early stages, and even as we move forward, because we are in the early days, and we kind of learn from each other. I guess we need to teach users how to use our platform, and eventually they also need to learn how to be able to use it and get what they want out of it. So I think those are, the things, my 2 cents about, how to build on chat. Hopefully voice soon for us as well. I wouldn't say I have a lot of experience building for voice, but that is definitely something we're also very interested in exploring down the road as well.
Cool. No, I think those are all really great insights and best practices. I think specifically, your last points you were making about, the fact that people are trying to add multi-intents and they expect the bot to know everything, and just like sort of operating within the bounds. I think this is something that you realize, because I was playing with your Eila bot a little bit. You add a lot of priming into it, right? Where you're like trying to prime the users to sort of understand how to use the bot best, right? And I think that's a really good way now, maybe an interim solution, to try and condition users to maybe understand how to use it in the most efficient means. So, I think it's really cool to actually see that in your bot and how you have that structured.
One thing to add here, just sorry to interrupt, but
go ahead.
As entrepreneurs, we are usually going after perfection. We want to build something that people are, in amazed when they see it. And we are sometimes, I guess, at this stage, especially in this field, ashamed of our bots, right? But if somebody comes in and does that, says the whole entire order and is not able to order, you feel, oh shit, I have a stupid bot. And you really don't, right? It's not about that. If you understand that, we're not at that stage, which is completely fine. It's also fine to be wanting to build that. Well, it's even better. But at the end of the day, bots, messaging platforms are limited. Just try and find a single function that it can really do, add value to someone, and build on that, and it will eventually get to a point where it's really, really intelligent. That's the way I see it. So, one piece of advice is don't be ashamed of your bots. but at the same time, don't build just to build. Build to add value. Build to solve a problem for someone, and that will eventually be your, I guess, saving hook. That's something that you will always use to get out of, the nasty situations you get into as an entrepreneur, I guess.
I really do love that like perspective, because I think a lot of people are struggling with that right now. And I think that's very, very practical. And, I think if more people start thinking like that, it's like, let's not really fixate on the problems with our bot, but let's, sort of understand that, hey, if it's working like 80% of the time or 60%, okay, great. It's still creating value. Now we know where we need to, patch the gaps per se. So I really love that perspective. And I think a lot of the guests, that are watching this podcast, will definitely internalize that as well. Now I guess speaking about people that are interested in getting into this space, can you recommend like any books that you picked up initially, or resources online, or people to follow that you think the audience should know about?
Sure. I'm pretty sure I'm going to sound pretty cheesy at this moment, but I've usually found Chatbots magazine to have a lot of resources that were useful. A lot of people who really went into the experience, who have actually built bots, who are actually building bots, write a lot of stuff on there. So it ends up being a really good resource because it gives you an insight from somebody who has experience, I think. Blog posts, Medium, I would say are the best resources right now. I haven't really, to be honest, read any books in specific about this field. Usually, the posts are usually the source of information I go to. I would say, it's really not any different from any other sort of technology in the early days. So, any basically product-oriented approach to building products from day one, I think would eventually be really helpful for people. I think if you even find something that's about chatbots in specific at this stage, it's probably going to have a lot of wrong things. So,
True.
So, take that with, a little bit of hesitation and build your own insights. That's why I'm saying, go after stuff that people who have actually tried it, been there, have written. That will be the best source of information at this stage, I would say.
Cool. No, I think that's really great advice. I will sort of give you the floor right now, and feel free to talk about anything you want to talk about in regards to Eila announcements you guys have, where they can maybe find you at upcoming events, online or in person.
Sure. So the first thing I'd like to talk about, of course, is we are super excited to kind of eventually open up our public beta. That's going to happen next month. And once that happens, I would love for anybody who's interested in the commerce vertical, or just wants to try it out, try to break it, or otherwise to come over and actually try the whole thing and give us some feedback. That would be absolutely useful. I will announce that we do have a free tier that would eventually, be very easy, remove the hurdles for people who are wanting to start to do basically social selling or start to sell online. It would be super easy for them and super affordable with low risks. So that's something that we're really looking forward to launch and getting a lot of feedback on. From the entrepreneurial perspective, I've been in this cycle for about, I don't know, it's been a while. It's been 5 years plus. Created a startup, raised money, it died as well, and then here we are again. So whether you're building for bots, voice platforms or anything else, I think, kudos to you. It seems like today our reality is not something that we're really super proud of as humans, and so I always seek to create my own reality. The easiest way I know is, like Steve Jobs said, the way you go through life, you're usually told not to, touch the walls, just keep walking straight. And then if you poke it, it actually pops out, something comes in return. And I think that's a beautiful perspective of life. You can influence everything around you and change it to what you would like it to be. You're always challenged with the problems, whether with your product, how to sell, your team, raising money, all these things. And you always need to find creative solutions to make it happen and work. And I would choose that every single day over than, going to a job, just being like I don't know, for the lack of a better perspective, being like a donkey who's following a carrot to the grave, basically. So, I mean, I salute every one of you. Go for it. Keep building. And I think, don't be afraid of failure, because that's just part of it. I don't know any better way to learn. And so, take failure as an educating experience, and believe that one day all of these failures will turn into success.
That was incredible, Samer. And you actually, you already answered my last question. I was going to ask you, what keeps you motivated and inspired? And, I think you answered that. It's like, you feel this drive to create your own reality and to not be encumbered by any limitations that are sort of artificial. So I really do love that. And, we'll definitely have you back again on the podcast, Samer. Once you guys launch your platform, we'd definitely love to learn more about that. And at that, thank you so much for joining us today.
Sure, it was a pleasure, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
All right.
See ya.
Bye-bye.